Hi class, we're continuing our work in chapter 10 and we're going to look at the Listbox control that's available for Windows Forms. This control gives us a lot of capabilities, and because it gives us a lot of capabilities it can be a little bit more complicated than some of our simpler controls that we looked at in the last chapter. Now I hope you've done some of the practice examples from the chapter because we did our Hello World in our video, and I know you need a little bit more practice than that. In this chapter, we'll be looking at the chapter examples a little bit more together to make sure that you're getting an understanding of what's going on. So I'm going to open Visual Studio, and I'm going to start on the Listbox control example that begins on page 601 of your textbook. I'm going to create a new project first. And I do want to add this to source control. I'm going to change it to my projects folder where I would like to keep it. I'm going to name this Listbox Example. And I am going to click OK. Looks good. Now in my Listbox example, I'm going to save this to my practice projects in TFS. That's fine. If you remember, we decided in our last chapter that any sort of default properties we set on our form, like the back color and things like that, were used by the controls that we added to the form. So that's kind of nice. It's really helpful for us. Now, in this example, before we get moving too far, we want to rename our form. And our form is going to be named in accordance with the example in the textbook. So I want to use Solution Explorer to rename it. I could just rename my form up here in the name property of my form, but things can get a little messy. So I'm going to use the rename capability in Solution Explorer. I'm going to call this Club Form. And before I press enter, I'm going to make sure that the .cs file extension still exists properly there in my renamed form. These things all have to match up. So if it looks good, I'm going to press enter to rename that form. And yes, I do want it renamed in all of the locations it occurs. And it's that renaming there that's so helpful for us. Now I can go back to the properties for my form. And now I'm ready to set things the way I would like. First of all, our back color, I'm going to try to use things a little bit similar to how they have it in the textbook. You can try any sort of experimenting that you would like to do. Now in the textbook, they actually give us the hex codes for that back color. So I could go to custom. Why am I not being able to get there? Hang on. And add a new color. Where to go? Nowhere. That's not what I want. Well, I will just pick blue. Where do they have it? That looks like blue. Now I want to set our text property in accordance with their instructions, and they would like it to be Computer Club Outing. Sign up. Now as soon as I press enter, we'll see that change on the form in the design mode. Now I'd also like to change my font. So let's go up and find our font control. And they would like, let's see, we'll use about a 12-point font. We would like for the color, the forecolor, to be a yellow. And I don't know, we can leave it the sans serif font. We'll try that. Now I'm going to make my form just a little bit smaller so we can see it better. and I think they have a size specified in the textbook if you want to locate that and get it exactly the right size. Now, before we add much else to our form, down at the bottom, let me show you this again in our PowerPoint. This is what our form is going to look like as we get done. We're going to have this heading here that says Select Events. We're going to have this list box of items where they can choose things, events that they would like to go on. And then down at the bottom, we're going to list the events that they select, that they click on. So we want to create an area down here to hold this message. So, and something here for it. And our heading. So we'll be creating those before we work with our list box. So I want my toolbox open. I'm going to pin it. I want to look at, I'm sure I could look at my common controls, but I'm an all control kind of person. I'm going to create a label up here at the top that's going to be our Select Events label. So I'm just clicking in that text property and typing that in. I think that this one needs to be bold and maybe a little bit bigger than our normal font because this is going to be a heading. So we'll say, yeah, we want it to be bold, and I think I'll make it like 14. That's good. Now I'd like to have my message down at the bottom. So let's use another label. And this label down here is going to say result. So find your text property, make it say that desired text. I'll move it down just a little bit. Now below that, our message is going to be displayed in a text box. So let's find our text box control. And I'm going to put a text box right down here at the bottom. And I think I'll just make it go all the way across for all of our results. Now for this text box, I want to give it a name. So I'm going to scroll up to my name property and double click there to name it TXTBX result. Now, because this text box is not going to be something that a user would type any data into, I'm going to find my read only property and change that to true. That way it's not something that the cursor accidentally stops in. Now along those same lines, if somebody were pressing the tab key, I really don't need again for the cursor to stop here. So I'll change my tab stop to false. That should be everything that I need in that text box. So I changed the text box controls name. Let's double check it. TXTBX result. I changed the read-only property to true, and I changed the tab stop to false. Let's run our program and see what our form's looking like. Oh, here it is. Get some junk out of the way. You can see my form. It's looking okay. So here down here is going to be my result, and we're going to have this list of events up here for them to pick from. So let's create our list of events. We want to use a Listbox control. So in your toolbox, look down and find Listbox. We don't want List View. Be careful because they're really very similar names, but we want the list box. And we want to draw this list box right under our Select Events heading. Now a list box is basically an array, and it's a list of items that are going to display in this control. So there's many ways that we have available to us to create these array entries. This array or collection that's going to be displayed in our list box is going to be displayed in the items property. See how the items property says that it's a collection? That means that it's a whole array of items. There are several ways we can add, change, delete those items, but we can use the collection editor within Visual Studio to enter items that we want to display without using any code. So I'm going to click on the ellipsis here, the 3 dots, to bring up the editor. Now we want several items in our collection here. And in the book, they show them in examples with double quotes because they are strings. But because this is a string editor, we don't have to worry about those quotes. They'll be added automatically where needed. Now, some of our events here are movie, dance, boat tour, dinner, hike, amusement park. And sport event. Once we're done, we're ready. We can just click OK to save this list. Now that we've saved it, it does display in our list box in design mode. Let's run our application and see how it looks. Ah, nice. I can click on things. Nothing happens, but I can click on them. Let's make our list box really small so that things don't fit. And let's run it again. Notice that it automatically creates a scroll bar for you. Now, the horizontal scroll bar is a little bit different. We could specify that we wanted one, but it would just have to be always on, so it's not as dynamic. I'll make this just a little bigger. And we can see all my events. I think my form is too big still, so I'm going to shrink it down a little bit, and we can add things that way later. Okay, so we created this array using our collection editor. We have all these items here in our list, and we decided the way our program is going to work, when a user clicks on one of these items, we want that name to show up down here in the result. And this is so that we can see what kind of code we need to use to process individual events in a list box, because this is going to be important to us. Now, remember, if we wanted to add code for a button, we double-clicked on the button in design mode. In the same way, if we want to associate an event with the clicking on an item in our list box, we can double-click on our list box. Now, the event created was selected index changed. Well, the selected index changed means somebody clicked on an item to select it, and they selected a different item than it was, so it changed the index. Because just like any array, when we're working with our listbox collection, we can access the members of that collection by using an array as a pointer, or I'm sorry, an index is a pointer into our array. Well, now we've got some method code generated here for us, and it says, all right, I've associated this for you with the event of somebody changing which item they've selected in the list box. So what kind of things do you want to happen then? Well, what we want to happen is we want to have our text from our list box, show up in our little events thing down there at the bottom, okay? So what we want to populate, we're going to use the this keyword. Remember, it's optional, but it's kind of helpful. The reason it's helpful is if you notice, as soon as we type this in the dot, IntelliSense gives us a list of all of the things that are on our form. So we can use that to generate that list so that we can just use hotkeys and tab through to generate our code really quickly. So I'm going to say, well, I want to update that text box, that result text box that we put at the bottom of our form. And the property that I want to update is the text property of that text box. And in updating that property, I would like to set it equal to the thing that was picked from our list box. So our list box is on this form. It's named list box what? Oh, someone didn't name it. Better go back to the form and fix that. So I'm going to go back to my design mode, click on my list box. In the properties, I'm going to find the name control. We were so excited about getting a collection in there, or at least I was. I forgot to give it an appropriate name, and I want to get that name updated. So I'm going to name it LSTBX Events. Now it's mad at me because I left that code just hanging. So I'm going to go back to our code here and try to fix this. So in our list now, I should see our list box events, which is perfect. And in that list box, I want to get the one thing that was selected. I want the selected item. And for that selected item, I want to change it to a string so that it will display properly in my list box, or in my text box. Sorry. So that line of code there is going to take care of it for us. So it is pretty involved. And if you look at it, it's not really that bad. We're saying get the selected item from the list box. Use its text property to update the text property of the result. So that way we can just display that information in our result text box. So let's run it and see if it's working. We have our list box here. We click on an item. We see it, sure enough, in the bottom down in our result. So we can click on something. We see our result change every single time. And that looks great. And close it. Now let's look at a few things before we move on. In our list box, notice that when I double clicked on the list box to generate the code, the event procedure for our list box, I hadn't properly renamed that control yet. So I've got an improperly named item here. That's okay. I could leave it alone, or I could come back to my form. Let's see what it does if it's really bothering us. And I could double click on my list box again now that it's properly named. It just goes right back to there, doesn't it? It's like, no, I know that you've got this set up properly. Well, what if we rename it? What if I type our new name, Listbox Events? Oops, don't do that. It's all happy. I don't have any errors. But I do have this error down here for that system generated code. It says Listbox 1 selected index change doesn't exist anymore. Well, that's true. I just changed it. So I could go to the system generated code and change it here also. LSTBXEVENTS. And we should see that error go away. Now be very careful when you're doing things like that. Always remember that you have the Control-Z button available to you. Use Control-Z so that you can revert your changes if something gets messed up. Now I'm going to make sure we have no errors. Nope, no errors anywhere. And I've resolved that problem there with that name. So I'm going to run this again. Make sure it's still working because I did make a change. That's great. Looks good. Sometimes We could use some different syntax if we wanted, sorry. There are lots of things we can try with our list boxes. We could also use, instead of this selected item out of our list box, we could say that we wanted to load this with our Listbox events dot text. Let's see how that works. Seems to do the same. Now we're going to make a change to our app where we won't be able to do that, but for now notice that that text property is basically the same as the selected item converted to a string. So we have some similarities. When we're using list boxes with Windows and with GUI applications, you guys know that oftentimes users are allowed to select multiple things. And for our club, we'd like to allow that also. So let's look at what we need to change to enable that feature. In our form design, we need to change a property for our list box. And that property is going to be our selection mode property. Right now our selection mode is set to 1, meaning we only allow one selection. We can change it to multiple simple. This is a really weird setup. It's like you have to press space or something to select each one. So to work in a normal selection mode, we want multi-extended. Now I'll run this just changing that property. We're not changing our code yet, so things won't work exactly right. But I can select one, I can hold down Control, select another, I can hold Shift, select a whole range. So we get that selection mode type experience that we're used to using with Windows this way. If you notice though, my result is only showing the first item in my selected list, because we need to update our code for that event to handle the fact that we could have multiple items in the list of selected items. So in order to do that, we're going to use a different property of our list box. Let's check our code. In our, oops, we're here, we're good. I'm going to add this new code up to the top. Use a for each to process multiple list items. So we're going to set things up a little bit differently here. We're going to start out with a string declaration, and we're going to make this string empty to start out, and then we're going to use a for each loop. And what we want to loop through are these items that have been clicked on in our list box. They're going to be strings, and we can call them whatever we want. You know, in our for loop, we'll call them activity. And the collection is in our Listbox events list box, and it's called selected items. And the S is what makes it into a collection, an array, a list of items. So for each of those, we want to add them to our result. We're going to go ahead and add a space character after that activity name so that we're ready to add the next activity without getting things all smushed up against each other. Finally, when we're done, we're going to set our text box text property equal to our new result variable. Now I want to comment out this remaining code. We'll leave this here for you so that you can see it. But basically we're saying we can't use this anymore because this code only handled one item in the list, and we're going to allow selections of multiple items. So let's run it. Now if I click on an item, I should see it in the list. If I control click to see another, I should see it. If I use the shift key, it should reload my list. Notice how it's staying right no matter what I do. That's because every time we click on a new item, it reruns our event procedure. So it starts over with these selected items. If I stop this, let's set up our for each loop as a breakpoint. I'm going to click on my for each statement and press F9 to set it as a breakpoint. I'm going to run my program. Now when I click on an item in the list, I should hit that breakpoint. There it is. It's in my for each loop. If I step into the for each loop, I'll see that it first looks at the collection, our selected items collection, and it says, oh, okay, I found something. So I want to put that thing I found into a new string called activity. If you notice down here in your local screen, it's created activity is a null value right now. But as soon as I click step into again, we should see that value of that first selected item. Now my for each is going to execute its body because there was an item in that collection. And it's going to add that to our result variable. Check to see if there's any more items in our collection. There are not. So we're going to drop out of our for each loop and update our text box result text with that result string that we built. And then display our form again. Now if we select another item, we'll be back to our breakpoint. This time, as we step through, we should see that we're going to have more than one item in that collection. There's our boat tour. Now we're checking our collection again. Oh, yep, we got another thing. So let's allocate that activity string again, and it's going to be updated to show what this item is. We're going to add that to our result string. Check to see if there are any more. There are not. So we're going to update our text box with our result. And again, be done displaying our form. Okay, so I'm going to stop there. I'm going to end execution. I'm going to turn off that breakpoint. And press F9 again. Remember to toggle that breakpoint and turn it back off. So in this video, we've looked at creating a Listbox item on our form, how to extract an item that was selected from the list box, and how to extract multiple items from our list box. We'll continue on in the next video looking at how we can add items to our list box dynamically in our code. Thank you.